not turn the clock back. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am taking the rereading book tag. I am a relatively fervent rereader. I'm not like super against it, and I understand why some people might not love it, but I really love re-escaping into a world that I have already discovered. So I felt like this would be such a great way to pay it homage. And that starts immediately with the first question. Where do you stand on the scale between almost never to all the time? And I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm a pretty good rereader. I do reread quite a lot, but I don't think I would exclusively reread. There's never been a month where I've only reread books, or there's never been a year where I've only reread stuff. I tend to kind of dot it in and out of the year. There might be a stretch of 10 books where maybe 2 or 3 of them have been rereads. There might be another stretch of books where maybe 5 of them have been rereads. There's no kind of rhyme or reasoning to how much I do it. I just do it when I see fit. And question 2 is, has that changed throughout your reading life? And honestly, not really. In 2021, I reread 25 books, and in 2022, I reread 14 books, and that might be somewhere around the area that we are for 2023. I haven't taken a look at my stats yet, but I think I'm somewhere around the 20 to 25 mark again. So it's definitely something that I do, but it's not something that I exclusively do. At the moment, as what I've read so far, 20 to 25 would be about a fifth of what I read. So pretty much on average, every year, a fifth of the books that I read is a reread. Question 3 is, when do you tend to reread a book? Is it immediately after you finished it? Is it years later? Or is it when the mood strikes? And it's typically years later. It's if I've forgotten the plot and I want to refresh it. It's if I'm in the middle of a reading slump and I want to get back into gear. It's if it's a series and the next book of the series is coming out, but I don't actually know what happened in this book that I've just finished a couple of months or a couple of years ago. I like to do it then to kind of bring everything back, to remind myself what had happened, who the characters were, why I really liked them, why I really didn't like them, and just get myself back into the flow that way. Question 4 is, why do you reread books? And as I said, it's usually if it's a series and I have forgotten what happened in the previous book, so I need a refresh before I go into the next book of the series that's just about to come out. It's also a little bit for comfort. I like to go back to familiarity when I'm feeling a bit down, when I'm feeling a bit distressed. I like to go back to something that I already know. It's the same thing with what I watch. If I'm feeling a little bit down, I will go back to New Girl. I will go back to Gilmore Girls. I will go back to Bear in the Big Blue House. I won't go into something new that I have to really focus on, that I have to really spend a lot of brain power on. I'll do something that I can pretty much follow the plot with my eyes closed. And I like to do that as well with a book. If I'm feeling a little bit low, if I'm noticing that I'm not really picking up books anymore, if I'm concentrating on other things, or if work is getting busy, or if my personal life is getting busy, I will go back to a book that I'm already familiar with. I will reread something that I don't necessarily have to concentrate on the plot. It's just somebody telling me a story. Question 5 is, how do you reread? Do you often read faster? Do you often read slower? Do you just read the best bits? Sometimes I read a little bit faster. Sometimes plot starts to come back to me, character traits start to come back to me, and I can speed through this bit a little bit more. Or if I'm listening to the audiobook and I find that I've switched off and I haven't really picked up what's happening, I'm okay. I don't have to skip back a chapter. I don't have to skip back another 30 seconds. I will just let myself go and say, oh, I kind of remember what's happened here. I don't really need to really go back. Sometimes when I'm rereading, I will even change the format. Like if I read it as an audiobook the first time, I will reread it as a physical book, or vice versa, just so that it feels a little bit new, just so that it feels a little bit exciting. Question 6 is, who or what do you specifically reread? Is there a specific author, or is there a specific genre? And I don't really have a genre or an author that I typically reread a lot, but I never reread a thriller. I make it a point not to reread thrillers because you know what's going to happen by the end of it. I know that some people will go back to it and read it again and try and pick out the things that they should have picked up on the first time, try and see if there were any clues that were like staring them in the face and that they completely glossed over. Whereas I don't like to go into it again and say, oh, I should have picked that up the first time. Oh, why did I not notice that this was happening? I don't want to go back into it and say, oh, you really should have picked up on that the first time. I like to just leave it to the side, say, I have solved that case, I have solved that mystery, let's go and do a new one. Question 7 is there a book that you found better when you reread it? And that was the first book in the Oh My God, What a Complete Ashling series by Sarah Breen and Emer McLysett. I first read this in 2016 when it first came out, and I was living in Ireland at the time. And I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars back then, but I didn't connect to it as well as I did the second time, which was in around 2018, 2019. By this stage, I had moved to Germany. I was living a whole new life in a whole new country with a whole new culture, with an entirely new language, new slang, and it felt like coming home when I read Aisling. It felt like I was sitting in a small little pub in a tiny little village in Ireland, and I was just having a catch up with an old friend over like a glass of wine. I just felt like it was such a little comfort. I actually think it was 2020 that I reread it, because I reread it because I knew I wouldn't be able to go home for a while. So I think we had just started getting ideas about lockdowns, about restrictions, about travel restrictions. And I just had it in my head that I wouldn't be going home for a while. So I needed something that was going to buoy me back up. And what's going to buoy you back up when you're missing home? Read a whole load of books about home. Watch a whole lot of series about home. Eat some Irish food. Do all of that. And it really did make me feel a little bit better, especially when I was basically locked into a tiny apartment. It just felt so much better that time. Question 8 is there a book that you felt was worse upon rereading it? And unfortunately, the book that did come out a bit worse is also by an Irish author, and that was Always the Bridesmaid by Sarah Webb. This one is about Amy, who notices that all of her friends are starting to marry off, including her younger sister Susie, who is like 23, 24. Amy's approaching her 30s, and she feels a little bit left on the shelf. And I felt like this book was a bit of a slap in the face. When I reread this, I was maybe 28, 29, so I was also approaching my 30s as I had read it, and it just felt a little bit outdated. It felt a little bit of its time. I think it was written late 90s to early noughties, and it felt very of its time that women of a certain age had to be married, had to have the house, had to have the kids, had to have everything that the generation before us thought was what you should do, tick the boxes. And I felt a little bit like this isn't the life that I would want to lead. But overall, the book felt a little bit outdated. I didn't like some of the writing that was in it. I didn't like some of the dialogue that was in there. I didn't like some of the phrases that were being used. It's one that I hold very dear because it's the first adult book that I ever read. But on rereading it, I don't think we got on well at the same time. Finally, is question 9. Which book do you think you have reread the most? And I think without a doubt it's probably Matilda. I would say that I have probably reread Matilda about 9 or 10 times by this stage. I've even done it once in German. I wanted to check out how good my German language skills were. If I could understand a book that was written entirely in German, I gave it my best shot and we got there. And I don't know if I would do that again. I don't know if I was reading a book in German, would I go to a book that I've already read in English and reread that? Or would I just read something completely new? Those are my thoughts on the reread tag. Do you like rereading, or what is the last book that you reread? If you would love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me the 2 arrows emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.